Hello, today is September 30th, and today we're going to be reading our gospel for this week, which is Mark chapter 10, verses 2 through 16. Some Pharisees came, and to test Jesus they asked, "Is it lawful for a man to divorce his wife?" He answered them, "What did Moses command you?" They said, "Moses allowed a man to write a certificate of dismissal and to divorce her." But Jesus said to them, "Because of your hardness of heart, he wrote this commandment for you. But from the beginning of creation, God made them male and female. For this reason, a man shall leave his father and mother and be joined to his wife, and the two shall become one flesh. So they are no longer two, but one flesh. Therefore, what God has joined together, let no one separate." Then in the house, the disciples asked him again about this matter. He said to them, "Whoever divorces his wife and marries another commits adultery against her. And if she divorces her husband and marries another, she commits adultery." People were bringing little children to him in order that he might touch them, and the disciples spoke sternly to them. But when Jesus saw this, he was indignant and said to them, "Let the little children come to me. Do not stop them, for it is to such as these that the kingdom of God belongs. Truly, I tell you, whoever does not receive the kingdom of God as a little child will never enter it." Then he took them up in his arms, laid his hands on them, and blessed them. Gospel of the Lord. Praise to you, O Christ. So we have a tough gospel this week. I think that's evident. And it's on a tough subject. It's divorce. And when we read this version of the gospel, Mark and Matthew and Luke have similar texts to one another. Mark is the most hardline version of this particular saying of Jesus. Actually, if you look at the parallel in Matthew, there are some cases in which Jesus says, yes, it is allowable for a couple to be divorced. But here in Mark, he says divorce is not allowable. And so what do we do with that difficult pronouncement from Jesus? Well, one version of it is to read it as plainly as possible, and that was a direction that the church went for a long, long time. It was a direction that caused the continuation of marriages that should not have been continued. It was a reasoning that allowed abuse to go on in domestic situations without any recourse for separation. It was a situation that caused the English Reformation. Henry V wanted to divorce his wife and marry another one so he could have a male heir, and the church said no, so Henry decided to form the Church of England. This particular passage caused massive conflict in the history of the church, in the history of the world. But what do we do with it? Because we have our own cultural practices that have developed around divorce. Why does Jesus say this? Why does Jesus pronounce such a why does he seem to be putting this weight on people? Well, there is, and why is this passage, and this is the other question, why is this passage connected to this passage about the little children? One reason that Jesus is talking about this, one reason the Pharisees are asking him about this, is that this is a hot button topic in first century Judaism. This is a conversation that's ongoing, and the Pharisees are looking to test Jesus to get his reaction, his understanding, his pull quote about this difficult topic. Judaism had its divorce laws, and this is coming from Deuteronomy 24. And it does say a man is allowed to divorce his wife. And for the rabbis at the time, coming into contact with other cultures, especially Roman law, which allowed couples to much more easily separate, and in fact allowed a woman to begin the divorce proceedings or separation proceedings. There's a conversation. Well, what is what does the law really say? What do we want to say that the law says? And there are a number of rabbis who have different reactions. Shammai, Ben Shammai, is one who says only adultery can allow divorce. And remember, this is a situation which men have the power in this situation. Men have the ability to separate. Hillel is another famous rabbi who gets quoted a lot and has many similarities to Jesus. Hillel goes in a totally different direction. He says there are many reasons a man could initiate divorce. One of which could be if a woman burns his dinner, is his famous hyperbolic example. If a woman burns the man's dinner, that is grounds for divorce. Hillel has this extreme reading of the law. And so Jesus says, no, there are no grounds for divorce. Why? So if these are the sort of range of opinions on something that seems unclear in the law, Jesus is saying, God gave you the ability to separate because of your hardness of heart. And notice who has the power in this particular setting. It is the man in the couple who can decide whether they are divorced or not. And especially in a society that is patriarchal, in which women have far fewer property rights, divorce is basically sentencing the female in the marriage to extreme poverty and social exclusion. She was someone who was divorced for a particular reason. We have in the gospel, Jesus talks to a woman who's been divorced many, many times and is living with a man who she's not married to. Jesus, in this hard, difficult passage, I don't think the ethic that Jesus is trying to give is one that advocates for continuing abuse. Jesus is saying if that the law as it is written that benefits men in the way that it is used, this is something that victimizes the women in this particular society. It is used as a bludgeon to frighten women. And Jesus is saying, you don't get to have that power. This is actually, in this context, meant to protect those who are weak and have no recourse under the law. And so we have this text attached to this text about little children because it is about protecting the weak, protecting the defenseless. When we read this text in light of our own laws, of our own society, are we emulating the ethic of protection that Jesus is trying to force people to adopt by saying, you are not allowed to use divorce as a cudgel to threaten your wife into submission? Are we adopting that ethic when we say that people cannot divorce even in cases of abuse? I would say no. In the case in our society, in our culture, in which women have property rights, in which women are able to support themselves in some fashion, and in which that a divorce would better protect them and possibly their children in a marriage that is not functioning well or is abusive, that is the ethic Jesus would adopt. We have to read this as ourselves in our own culture and as what Jesus and the culture that Jesus is speaking out of. What is the underlying intent of what Jesus is saying? It's a hard text. And I hope you can join us for worship this Sunday, which we'll get deeper into this. All right. Have a good week. Bye-bye.